Close your eyes and try to remember your first birthday. You can't? There was cake. There were faces leaning in close, singing to you, a room full of people who loved you more than anything in the world. And you remember none of it. This is strange when you think about it. You were there. Your eyes worked. Your ears worked. You were learning language at a speed you will never match again for the rest of your life. And yet, the entire first chapter of your existence has been erased, as if someone reached into your skull and quietly deleted the footage. Scientists have a name for this. They call it infantile amnesia. And the real answer to why it happens is far stranger than simply, you were too young to remember. Because you did remember. At the time, you remembered everything. Here is the part that unsettles people. A 2-year-old can absolutely recall events from months earlier. Ask a toddler about the trip to the zoo, the day the dog ran away, the time they fell and scraped their knee, and they will tell you, in detail, the memories are there. They are vivid. They are working. And then they vanish. Somewhere between the ages of 6 and 8, the door quietly closes. The early memories don't fade slowly like an old photograph left in the sun. They disappear on a schedule, as if the brain has a policy about them. And that policy is the mystery scientists have been trying to crack for over 100 years. The first person to really sit with this puzzle was Sigmund Freud, back in the late 1800s. He noticed that his patients almost never had memories from before the age of 6 or 7, and he coined that term, infantile amnesia, to describe the blank space. Freud had his own theories about why, most of which we no longer take seriously. But he was right about one thing. The blank space is real. It is universal. It happens to nearly every human being on Earth, regardless of culture, language, or how loved they were. So what is actually going on? For a long time, the popular explanation was simple. Babies don't have language yet, so they can't store memories in a form they can later retrieve. No words, no narrative, no memory. It sounds reasonable, but it turns out to be mostly wrong. Because the brain doesn't store memory the way you store a document. There is no single filing cabinet. Instead, a memory is scattered. The sound of the room lives in one place, the faces in another, the feeling of the cake on your tongue in yet another. To remember, your brain has to gather all those pieces back together and reassemble them into a single moment. And the structure that does the gathering, the part that ties the scattered pieces into one memory you can actually recall, is a small seahorse-shaped region deep in your brain called the hippocampus. In a baby, the hippocampus is still under construction. And this is where the story takes a turn that almost sounds like science fiction. Because the reason your early memories disappear may not be that they were never stored. It may be that your growing brain deliberately overwrote them. A neuroscientist named Paul Franklin, working with his colleague Sheena Jocelyn in Toronto, ran a series of experiments that reshaped how we think about all of this. They were studying something called neurogenesis, which is just a technical word for the birth of new brain cells. In adults, new neurons trickle in slowly. But in infants, the hippocampus is exploding with them. New cells are pouring in at a staggering rate, wiring themselves into the network as fast as they can. That sounds like a good thing. More brain cells, better memory, right? It's the opposite. Franklin and Jocelyn found that when a flood of new neurons muscles their way into the hippocampus, they don't just add capacity, they rewire the existing circuits. And every time a circuit gets rewired, the memories stored in the old pattern become harder and harder to reach. Imagine a library where new shelves are being installed every single day, and each time they're installed, all the books get shuffled to new locations and the catalog is thrown out. The books are still in the building, you just have no way to find them anymore. To test this, they did something remarkable. They took young mice, whose brains are also busy with rapid neurogenesis, and they slowed that process down. And when they slowed the flood of new neurons, the young mice held onto their memories far longer than they should have. Then they did the reverse. They artificially boosted neurogenesis in adult mice, whose memories are normally stable, and those adults started forgetting. The memories washed away. Think about what that means. Forgetting your childhood isn't a failure of your brain. It's a feature. The very process that made you smart, that built the dense neural machinery you use to think and speak and reason, is the same process that quietly bulldozed the memories of your earliest years. You paid for your mind with your childhood, but the neurons are only half the story, because there is another force at work, and it lives not inside your skull, but in the world around you. A developmental psychologist named Patricia Bauer has spent decades studying exactly when and how these early memories slip away. And what she found is that childhood memories don't just require a working brain, they require something else. They require a sense of self. Here is the strange thing about very young children. They don't yet have a strong concept of me. A memory, the kind you can consciously travel back into, is not just a recording of an event. It's an event that happened to you, that you understand as part of your own ongoing story. This is called autobiographical memory, and the key word is autobiographical. It needs an author. It needs a main character. And in your first years, that character was still being written. Researchers have watched this happen in real time. There's a famous test involving a mirror and a spot of rouge secretly placed on a toddler's nose. Before a certain age, the child sees the mirror and reacts as if looking at another baby. They reach toward the glass. But somewhere around 18 months, something clicks. The child reaches up and touches their own nose. In that instant, they understand, for the first time, that the person in the mirror is them. That flicker of recognition is the beginning of the self. And it turns out that memory follows close behind. You cannot store the story of your life until there is a you for the story to happen to. There is a third ingredient too, and it's one most people never consider. Language, and specifically the way the people around you talk to you about the past. A researcher named Chi Wang made a fascinating discovery by comparing memories across cultures. She found that adults in cultures where families tell rich, detailed stories about a child's day, asking questions, filling in feelings, building little narratives, tend to have earlier and more detailed first memories. In cultures that emphasize the individual and their personal experiences, first memories arrive sooner. In cultures that emphasize the group over the self, they arrive later. Do you see what that means? The reach of your memory into your own past was shaped, in part, by whether the adults around you handed you the words to hold on to it. Memory is not just something your brain does alone in the dark. It is something you were taught in conversation, at the dinner table, in the car, in 1,000 tiny exchanges you will never remember having. So put it all together. Why can't you remember being a baby? Because your hippocampus was still being built, flooded with new neurons that overwrote the old patterns as fast as they formed. Because you did not yet have a stable sense of self to anchor the memories to. And because you had not yet been taught the language and the storytelling habits that turn a fleeting experience into a lasting one. 3 forces, working at once, closing the door behind you as you walked forward into your life. And here is the part that lingers. Those years are not gone the way you think they are. You cannot consciously recall them, but they are not without effect. The way you were held, the tone of the voices around you, whether the world felt safe or frightening. All of that was absorbed by a brain too young to file it as a story, and yet it shaped the deepest architecture of who you became. You carry your infancy not as memory, but as the shape of your reactions, your fears, your sense of whether people can be trusted. You are, in a very real sense, built out of a story you can no longer read. Psychologists sometimes call the memories we think we have from very early childhood fictional. Because when researchers dig into people's supposed first memories, many of them turn out to be reconstructions, assembled later from a photograph, a family story told and retold, a scene we pieced together and mistook for the real thing. Your first memory might not be a memory at all. It might be a story you were told so many times that your brain quietly filed it as your own. Which means the earliest thing you think you remember may be the one thing you never actually experienced. So the next time someone asks you about your first birthday, notice what happens. You reach back and your hand closes on nothing. Not because nothing happened, because everything did. And your growing mind traded those first bright moments for the very ability to remember anything at all. Close your eyes and try to remember your first birthday. You can't. And now you know it was never yours to keep.